on him.
Welcome to Shakespeare Top 9. Today we will be talking about Shakespeare's most evil characters. But first, make sure to like and subscribe or there will be a demon at the end of your bed. Quick, 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's get into the video. Number 9, Shylock from Merchant of Venice.
Shylock was a Jewish moneylender. He paid people in large amounts of ducats, which is an old form of money. He lived in the Christian city of Venice, often disliked by the main protagonist Antonio. He is willing to lend money to Antonio, and he did, but Antonio was late on paying it back, and Shylock threatened Antonio's friend Bassanio that if he didn't give him his money, he would have to pay with a pound of his own flesh. Thankfully, Portia comes to help, saying it is against the law for a foreigner to shed the blood of a Christian. And Shylock was found guilty for trying to kill Antonio. Luckily, he was given a fine and his life was spared.
Number 8 is Tybalt from Romeo and Juliet.
Tybalt Capulet is from the city of Verona, a very divided city with ongoing battles between two families, the Montagues and the Capulets. Tybalt is part of the young male servants in the families, who meet on the street and sometimes fight that leads to an accident. Tybalt was the nephew of Romeo, Tybalt being the only person to really get aggressive and angry at the other family. It really shows that his personality and emotional energy is filled with rage. Because of this rage, at the scene of the Capulet party, he got into a fight with Mercutio, who was known as the comedian of the group, made fun of Tybalt saying, "Thou consortst with Romeo," accusing Tybalt of calling them minstrels, and draws his swords. Whilst they were fighting it out, Romeo has walked into the square and attempts to intervene the two. He didn't understand the point of the battle and started to physically get in between the two, trying to stop them. Being confused with Romeo in between them, Tybalt stabs Mercutio underneath Romeo's arms. Seeing what he did, Tybalt ran away, with Romeo chasing after him. Romeo catches after him whilst the two families watch him and have his last breath. Romeo and Tybalt have a big fight and Romeo comes out victorious. We put this in number 8 because of the big dramatic factor that Tybalt created in the play. This is the start of a slow and sad climax of the story.
Number 7 is Claudius from Hamlet.
King Claudius was an interesting character that was selfish and unforgiving in his actions. His plans were to take the throne from his brother, King Hamlet. So Claudius sets up a fencing match between Hamlet and Laertes and tries to sabotage them by poisoning Laertes' sword and giving him a poisonous drink. But his plans fail when Queen Gertrude drinks it instead and dies. King Hamlet was stabbed by the sword but managed to survive. He then started to catch on to Claudius' plans, so he took the sword and stabbed Laertes in the back and killed him. He then forces Claudius to poison himself, and then King Hamlet returns to the throne of Denmark.
Number 6, Iago from Othello.
Iago is the main antagonist in the story Othello. He is the husband of Emilia, who is the attendant of Othello's wife, Desdemona. Iago hates Othello and devises a plan to ruin him by making him believe that his wife is having an affair with his general, Michael Cassio. Iago is one of Shakespeare's most devious villains. His terrible characteristics fascinate the audience, such as his lack of motivation for his actions. In the first scene, he claims to be angry at Othello because he gave the position of lieutenant over to someone else instead of him. In another scene, he claims that Othello slept with his wife without any evidence. None of these claims seem to adequately explain his deep hatred for Othello. Iago is willing to take revenge on anyone who he thinks has wronged him. The slightest provocation from anyone, and he will make sure they suffer, smiling at the pain and damage he causes. Iago murders his own wife too. Some speculate that this stems from his general hatred of women that Iago displays. Others say that the reason why Iago oppresses Othello is because of his homosexual love for him. He seems to enjoy it when he prevents Othello from enjoying the love from his wife, and often shows his affection for Othello. In the end of the play, Othello kills Desdemona, thinking that she had an affair with him. When he finds out that it is not true, and this was all just lies set up by Iago, he kills himself next to Desdemona's body.
Number 5 is Edmund from King Lear.
Edmund is the main antagonist of King Lear. He is seen in the story as a person who will do anything to get where he wants to be. Edmund is a strong sidekick for the Duke of Cornwall. They both love the power and fear they bring down on everyone else. There is only one moment in the play where Edmund shows some sort of weakness. This is after both Regan and Gonryo die for him. In a change of heart, he makes a bold statement, saying that he ordered Cordelia's death.
Number 4 is the Duke of Cornwall from King Lear.
The Duke of Cornwall, husband of Regan, is a hot-tempered man who loves his power and will not be fazed if someone does not overly like him. He rules with Edmund, and nothing can stop them after he kicked out King Lear straight out of his own home to leave him homeless. Gloucester, Edmund's father, finds Lear some shelter close to the castle because he felt bad. After time, Cornwall found out what Gloucester did and wanted to hurt him out of the pleasure of his heart. So what he did was pull Gloucester's eyes out. Cornwall knew he couldn't get away with literal murder, but he will do as much as he can to cause pain and conflict.
At number 3, we have Richard III from Richard III.
Richard III is the major villain in this play, but he is also the protagonist. Some say that Richard III was the embodiment of evil, comparable to medieval character Vice, who was also an embodiment of evil, but in later scenes he becomes a very complicated character. Throughout the play, Richard is always addressing us, the audience, directly, and basically acts like our tour guide for most of the play. Even though that's pretty much breaking the fourth wall. We can't help but identify with the guy, even though he is most definitely a villain. This is why Richard is so often referred to as an anti-hero, a protagonist who lacks hero qualities like strong morals, honesty, courage, and strength, but has the potential to be good. Richard doesn't win the crowd through any heroic feats. He basically lies, cheats, and murders his way to the throne. He is very manipulative in the story, as he was able to make others, and even the audience, sympathize with him. He was able to use this to overthrow his brother, King Edward IV, and become Lord Protector of England, but not king. To become king, he needed to do very deceitful things. He started off his doings by manipulating Mary Anne into marrying him, a person of great nobility. Then he executes her brother and places guilt on King Edward. He then murders members of the English royal court who were loyal to King Edward's 2 sons, who were next in line of kingship. With his enemies eliminated, he was able to imprison the young princes into jail and get them killed. After this, the whole kingdom was a mess, so he murdered his own wife and attempted to marry the daughter of the deceased Queen of England to finally secure his place on the throne.
Number 2 is the duel of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth from the play Macbeth.
Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are some of the most evil people in all of Shakespeare's stories. The story of Macbeth is that of a tragedy. In the play, there are many evil deeds that Macbeth committed. These include murders of Duncan and Banquo, Lady Macduff and her son. Macbeth is also responsible for Scotland's disorder. Although they are both evil, Lady Macbeth is considered to be vastly more sinister than Macbeth. This is because she convinces her husband into murdering King Duncan by attacking his manhood. Without her relentless urging, Macbeth would not have changed his mind and not killed him. Aside from being manipulative, she is also an accomplice in the murder. She drugs Duncan's 2 attendants and then takes the daggers back to the king's chamber to smear the attendants with blood and leave the murder weapons as evidence against them. Macbeth is actually considered to be a tragic hero, which is a hero who has a fatal flaw that leads to their downfall. Macbeth is arrogant, and his arrogance leads to greed. Greed leads to destruction. It is because of this greed he becomes a tyrant, and in his desperation he holds on to what he has. He is a tyrant. If it weren't for the 3 witches to bring rise to his ambition, and not for Lady Macbeth constantly pushing him to do things that he would not commit normally, he would remain as the hero of the play.
And finally, in number 1, the most evil villain on this list, Aaron the Moor from Titus Andronicus.
Set by many sites the team has researched, Aaron the Moor is undoubtedly the most evil character. To give you a good example of what he has done, here is a short list of his crimes: serial murders, serial rapes, mutilation, mass arson, conspiracy, grave digging, infant kidnapping, psychological torture, and much, much more. His goal was to destroy Titus's life and family. Aaron, brought into this world to create misery, surprisingly has a son. Aaron is very protective of him and would go so far to kill anyone who causes his son any kind of harassment or racism. For example, the nurse, who called him several racial slurs and wished for him to die, was killed by Aaron. Tamora was the birth mother of Aaron's son. Everyone around the hospital wanted the baby to die in account of the shame it has brought to Tamora. Unfortunately, Aaron wanted it to live. The main reason why Aaron was so evil is because of what he did to Titus and his family, like I said before. Aaron overheard Chiron and Demetrius arguing over who should marry Laviana, daughter to Titus. Them all being prisoners ready to do anything to cause misery, Aaron convinces them to murder Pausanias and rape them in the woods. After that, Aaron forges a note to lead Quintius and Martius, son of Titus, to the large hole where the corpse of Pausanias lies, making out that Saturnius was guilty, the person who Tamora was having an affair with. Aaron then talks to Titus and promises him if that he chops off both of his hands, he will save both of his sons. Titus does so, just for Aaron to send him the heads of his son, leading Titus to become insane with grief. We put Aaron at number 1 because of the main goal throughout the play, to bring as much misery to Titus as he could, which is what any evil character should do.
Thank you all for watching today's video. If you made it all the way to the end, make sure you hit the bell button and share it with all your friends. Otherwise, Aaron the Moor will be watching you forever. 5, 4, 3